Donald Trump just recently, and you might be able to spot this one a mile away, Ant, but he got it in his heart to start telling people that tariffs are so great. And as we speak, the Supreme Court heard the tariff case just a couple of days ago, and it did not go well for the administration. So take everything he says with a grain of salt, because he probably, if he's a reasonable human being, he knows that the tariffs are about to be declared unconstitutional. That's my prediction from what I've been able to glean from the court case, and I suspect it's 6-3 or 7-2. I don't think it's going to be a particularly close decision. And so, okay, he comes out on Truth Social and he says tariffs are so great, and if you don't love tariffs, you're a fool, he says. And because tariffs are so great, we're going to send everybody, except the filthy rich, of course, we're going to send everybody a check for $2,000. So my first question was to Antony, how much is that going to cost? And then my second question to Antony was, okay, go figure out how much we've taken in on the tariffs. Okay, Ant, the floor is yours.
What we took in fiscal year 2025, which the government's fiscal year ends September 30. So from when the tariff started till September 30, 195 billion. However, it's once they ramped up, the tariff revenue was coming in at about 30 billion a year. So if they continued, it would be $360 billion a year.
That's a lot of money.
360 billion. Yeah.
And then again, it isn't.
Well, yeah, right. Where the government's concerned, it's not. But there's a lot of footnotes here. One footnote is that estimates are that consumers pay at least half of those tariffs, at least half. So that means that, on the one hand, he's saying, okay, we're collecting $360 billion. On the other hand, half of that, $180 billion, is coming out of the pockets of consumers in the form of higher prices. And then roughly 40%, estimated, of course, is being paid by companies in the form of U.S. companies in the form of lower profits. So that's 90% being paid by Americans, either Americans at the point of sale when you buy the thing, or in terms of lesser returns on your savings investment because the companies you're invested in are earning less. So 90% of the tariff is being paid by Americans.
Well, but we told everybody that was going to happen, and it did. I mean, there's no surprise there.
Yeah, but where the check comes in, things start to get kind of interesting. So he says, cut everybody a $2,000 check. And that statement is not as clear as it might seem. And I couldn't find an answer to it, because when he says cut every American $2,000 check, does he really mean every American, because there are 340 million of us? Or does he mean every household, because there's 130 million of those? Or does he mean every taxpayer, because some households have more than one taxpayer? There's 160 million of those. I assumed that he meant taxpayer. So take that.
I don't know. And the only thing I have to go by here is how we went about sending out checks, roughly the same amount as if memory serves, during COVID.
You think it's going to be per person?
That's the vibe I take. Look, I think it's never going to happen. Because once the Supreme Court intervenes, all the tariffs have to be returned, which is going to be a fiasco to end all fiascos.
Right.
But working with what we've got in front of us, I think the only way to read it is every person. And I think you might have to read it as every adult person. You might read it as every taxpayer. But he said everybody, but then he said not the rich.
Oh, not the rich. Right. So the way the numbers break down, because you want to take the rich off the table, and even then, it's unclear what does he mean by the rich. Does he mean the billionaires, the top 1%, the top 20%?
I would assume that what we're looking at here is everybody through the upper middle class.
Upper middle class. Okay, so let's say
so that would be
the top 20%.
4 quintiles.
Oh, I want
to remove 1 quintile.
The middle class, the upper middle class. Okay, so you want the middle class, the next one down, the next one down. So the top 40% out. is
No,
what you
maybe
want.
the top. No, I think the top 20% out. would
Okay,
make-
that's what I had. Yeah, a top 20% out, and going by number of taxpayers.
Well, but
That's gonna,
that does well. That's
you
gonna.
want people? I can do people.
I don't know, right? Because my knee jerk reaction is, well, everybody on Social Security is going to have a problem, but then they are taxpayers, right? They pay tax on their Social Security, so that takes care
notice,
of that.
I mean, what's happening here, and this will become clear in a moment, is this is basically angels dancing on the head to pin, and we're debating whether they should hop on one foot or they can use both feet. Yeah, right? It doesn't matter.
Go ahead, do your math thing.
But roughly speaking, the $2,000 check to all of the people, however you define that and however you define all, roughly plus or minus some, it comes out to be about what the government would collect annually, the $360 billion, which means at the end of the day, the only thing that's happened is the government has collected a bunch of money through tariffs, and the government's going to turn around and hand it all back out again.
Yeah.
So we're getting back all of our money, except that the government was in the middle of the whole transaction.
It's a redistribution of the money, right?
There is some redistribution, granted.
So there's that, and then there's the government control, and this is clearly for the buying of votes later.
That makes me very nervous. Just like in the Biden years, they were talking about student loan forgiveness, and we said at the time,
that's right.
This is a clear buy-off of college students. We're just going to take money from taxpayers, hand it to college students so they vote for us.
And that's exactly what would have happened.
Yeah, except they lost the election. I submit, however, there's a political gambit here. I think, as strange as some of President Trump's ideas are, I think that there's a lot more thought behind them than we might think at first. I submit that this is a political gambit to pressure the Supreme Court.
Oh, I think it's clearly that.
Because
clearly.
If the Supreme Court rules that the tariffs are indeed unconstitutional, Trump says, well, those $2,000 checks, the Supreme Court just shot you in the foot. Now everybody's mad, and the Supreme Court knows this.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. Those tariffs are going to have to be returned.
Oh, if the tariffs are found to be unconstitutional, they will likely have to be returned. Of course, I would imagine there's another court case that's involved there.
And how in God's name are you going to accomplish that?
Oh, see, that's the weirdness. They will get returned not to the entities that actually paid them, but to the entities from
the vendors.
Which they were collected.
Where they were collected. So that means the corporations are going to get money back. I think that as far as Trump goes, this is very shrewd politics. Very shrewd. And he gets to walk away the hero literally no matter what the outcome.
Yeah.
And that's pretty smart.
I did think there were a couple of things I thought were really funny that came out of this. One was the Treasury Secretary apparently tripping over himself to walk back this whole thing. It was him saying, well, there are lots of ways you might pay a dividend. Treasury Secretary imagining paying a $2,000 check to every American.
Well, also, I mean, look, you saw how difficult it is to figure out what that even means.
Right, yes. Yeah.
Look, we kind of do this for a living, and we can't figure out what that means.
And you brought up the COVID checks, which is an interesting thing. If you recall, in the age of COVID, when they were cutting checks and giving out money to businesses and all of that, it got so complicated because they're given to everybody that basically they're just giving money. You could walk up and say, look, I haven't got my money yet. And they say, here, have some money. And off you go. There's tremendous wastage.
We predicted at the time that would yield tremendous inflation. And everybody said, it'll be fine.
Right. The MMTers were all out saying, where's the inflation? Where's the inflation? And then 2022 hit, and the MMTers are all gone.
And I want to know where the MMTers are.
Right. Yeah. But I'm not done poking fun. One of the things that I believe the president said is that, with all this tariff revenue, we can pay down the debt.
Well, apparently not.
It does not come close to being enough money to do that.
Oh, even if they didn't cut a $2,000 check to every taxpayer in the United States and instead kept that money in the government coffers, the budget would not be balanced.
Oh, right. The tariff revenue needs to be about 6 times what it currently is just to get us to a balanced budget. And from that point forward, then you can start paying down the debt.
Never going to happen.
Yeah, so it's 1/6 the size of what's necessary to get us to zero. Forget about paying down any debts.
And I don't think people will fully comprehend what 1/6 actually means. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so the annual tariff revenue on an annualized basis, $360 billion. The deficit this year, I believe, is $2.1 trillion, or ballpark $2 trillion.
You're using numbers they're not going to get. If they went out to buy a car,
Oh,
what would it mean then? What would it mean to buy groceries?
do you mean in terms of what? Oh, you mean you want me to scale this down to like the size of a household?
Yeah, but I want to hear what 6/6 looks like at the ground level.
The 360 billion. Oh no, the 2 trillion.
Look, if we have to have if we're only collecting 1/6 now, and we all know that prices have gone up tremendously. As a result.
Oh, I see.
What would prices look like if it went up to the 6/6 that would be necessary to balance the budget?
Oh, in other words, what would happen if what would be required for the tariff revenue to be the full 2 trillion?
That's right. What would it cost regular
Yeah,
people?
basically infinity, because you can't jack the tariff rates that high. At some point, the tariff rate becomes so high that we just give up buying things from foreigners entirely, and there is no tariff revenue.
So no matter what.
That point's going to come before we ever get to the 2 trillion that we need to balance the budget.
So no matter what, it's not going to work.
But it ain't happening.
But if we tried to make it work, every time you walked into a grocery store, you would only find products that were grown in the United States.
Yes, right. All foreign things would be, and not just products that are only grown in the United States. You would only find products whose inputs were grown or manufactured in the United States. So if you need a combine to harvest your wheat, but the combine is made in Brazil, no wheat for you.
No wheat for you.
Yeah.
So people would literally starve. That's how well tariffs work.
Yeah, now, let me say, because people have said to me before, yeah, but once upon a time, the United States, the federal government survived on tariff revenue alone. In fact, once upon a time, the United States survived on United States farmers alone.
Mm-hmm.
Except at the time, there were probably, I'm guessing, 1% of the number of Americans that there are today.
That's about right, actually. The best estimates, and they are only estimates, but the best estimates prior to the census of 1790 were that there were about 3.5 million people.
Yeah, 1/10 of what we have,
1%.
or 1/100th of what we have now.
And if you remember, when we had Phil Magnus on to talk about tariffs when they first became a political hot potato, he said something that resonated with me and that I repeat a lot now. Tariffs are great if you're a small nation and you have a lot of coastline, because your trade comes in and you could tax it at the point where it enters, and then you don't have to have a gigantic administration to tax literally anything else. So if you're Jamaica, tariffs might work just fine.
Right.
But if you're Canada or the United States or Mexico, oh God, come on. No, it's not going to be fine. Right. And it gets way more complicated the bigger you get and the more interconnected your economies get. And people now, say idiotic things like globalism is a bad thing and we have to rely only upon ourselves. Oh my God, globalism made all of our lives so much better.
It did. You know, and when I first started doing public speaking back in the early 2000s, globalization was like the buzzword. And everyone was so excited because countries that had been for as long as humans have existed, underdeveloped countries, all of a sudden through globalization, were becoming modernized.
Yep. And we don't want that, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
At Words and Numbers, we spend a lot of time talking about what's going on in the economy and the government, but fundamentally all of this boils down to one thing. The greatest threat facing modern society is a lack of respect, that people who disagree somehow find it difficult, if not impossible, to discuss their differences in a civil manner. We at CiVL are interested in upgrading civilization by encouraging people to engage with new ideas and ultimately engage civilly with each other. If you share this idea, please join us by subscribing at CiVL.com. That's CiVL.com.